Staying alive.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
That's right. Tony Caravan with you. Rather bright in here today. I guess it's, excuse me. If you're new to this show, no, it is.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Well, yeah. But no, I'm not on some.
Did you accidentally inject yourself with some kind of psychotropic agent?
Strictly caffeine with a lot of carbonation in it. Now, my eyes show that I just woke up. I'm trying to put together quickly. I'm going to forego the usual reading of the mail scams where they're trying to take advantage of people by offering them 36% interest rates. I apologize for the the clearing of the throat. If you're new to this show, that's kind of like what I do. It's the way I roll.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And we drink a lot of carbonated caffeine, and sometimes it causes some natural bodily reactions. I'm putting an ice cube in my drink, and we're going to get on with this thing. So, weather-wise, my neck of the woods, it's May 25th, 2021, in the former United States, as I call it. I'm situated somewhere around the Ohio Valley, mid-Atlantic states, surrounded by Appalachian Mountains. And that's nothing much I can do about that. The weather here is kind of unique because of the mountain range. Currently, it's about 59 degrees outside of this studio, and it's looking like today's going to be mostly cloudy. High maybe 75 if we're lucky. Chance of rain. Yesterday it rained all day, which is fine for me, and it's fine for my garden. That's the weather. I talked yesterday. First, we'll get a few things out of the way before we get into today's topic. Today's topic is going to be something that I've talked about many times on the show. And if you look at the title card that brought you here, it's quite obvious. I had originally mentioned a book yesterday here by a woman named Lena Cantrell. Okay. And the full title of the book is The Greatest Story Never Told. And like I was saying before, there are always titles out there. There's no copywriting a title. So, this book I finally found. It's still available on Amazon, but in order to get it, look how thick it is. The price was $550. So it's really a collector's item now. And it's the complete with the subtitle is The Greatest Story Never Told, a scientific inquiry into the evidence of the fall of man from a higher civilization in antiquity. And this book is quite the compendium. I mean, we're talking about, this was a doctoral thesis by Ms. Cantrell, who I don't know nothing more other than the biography listed here, that she was originally from Salzburg, Austria, and now lives in the Twin Cities. But that was at the time of the writing of this book, which, let's check the copyright, was 1988. So I have no idea. I wish her well. Don't know if I know she wrote another book when she was like in high school. So but she's got it together. This thing is intense. And I don't know what to say to people who want to study this, the vast information in this book, because since it's been out of print, the price has just shot up to $550. There's a lot of books like that happens to, especially, such an intense book. But I'll just give you an idea of and how this may apply to some of the stuff we're talking about now. They said this would make sure I in the microphone on this. This is referring to cataclysm. Just randomly in this book, and this book isn't really this book talks about everything from the Vedas to all of the ancient gods. I mean, her research is so in depth. I haven't seen any, and I've read all the books practically, on catastrophe topics and ancient people, the before people, and all that kind of stuff. But listen to this. They said would cause an increase in glaciation and then sudden drops in the sea level, all recorded in the Veda, which are referring to in this particular paragraph was referring to. This is believed to have caused an alteration in the rotation of Earth, by which then the Egyptians were right, saying the sun changed its course. This would disrupt the magnetic field and a possible total reverse of the poles. An automated telescope is now and then she's talking about, the technology that NASA has applied to study this. And I'll tell you, it's unbelievable. I haven't really read this book in many years. I talked about this in yesterday's show. And I was just going through some dog ears I have here. And I'm trying to pick out maybe something that may be of interest. And I don't want to waste your time while I do this. I mean, there's so many things in here that are really crazy. It's like something that for some reason I underlined. If they would lay off refined foods, step up such vitamins as zinc and ascorbic acid, they would not be making, and like that's something. This book was written in 88, and zinc and ascorbic acid she was talking about in a context of, in health back in, 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. And, so it's amazing. My dog ears and highlights have faded. It's interesting that since the flood, so the Veda says, some 12,000 years will pass until the next destruction. As each eon culminates, each will harbor the same behavior traits, but with more people who will contribute to the final collapse. In the end, women will have too many children, blah, blah, blah. The only point they missed is that there'll still be a mixture of chemistries causing hyperplastic tissue, creating tall, ungainly people as well as short. Too many children refer to children born less than 5 to 6 years apart. I don't know what she meant about there, but there's the 12,000 years. If you could find this in an old bookstore somewhere, Lena Cantrell. Here's what she looks like. She's a fascinating, interesting looking woman. And if you can see her without the glare. And like I said, look how thick this is. And it's fairly small print. Well, anyway, I went to that book. I intend to reread. This is my like summer reading. I'm gonna reread that book. It's crazy.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm drinking a combination of one of the top colas and one of the, in an earlier video, I forgot to mention, I start these things, then I get off on a tangent. Most of these colas were created by, and then I got on a tangent, by pharmacists. These were drinks concocted, or concoctions put together by in pharmacies. So that's that.
Good morning.
So let's get into the show. And as always, we're going to look at the title card, the meme, so to speak, for the YouTube show. And I have Coming Earth Catastrophe. And on that, there's a number of people. In the upper left-hand corner is Douglas Vogt from the Diehold Foundation. And he has a new video out, I just noticed. He's one of the original proponents of the 12,000 year cycle, though, as you can see, Lena is talking about it, and she's referring to some ancient documents as well. We've got Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers, a picture of him there, just to the right of Mr. Vogt, and below Davidson is Jimmy from Bright Insights, who is, if you look in the lower left corner and you look at the Eye of Africa, who has a very recent video out pointing to that as a possible site of Atlantis. And before you get in, think there's going to be a woo-woo show. He refers to Randall Carlson, who's also studied some of these ancient catastrophe things, though in some of his speeches has referred to these as meteor events. And of course, there's Graham Hancock, who's been talking about this kind of stuff for forever, and many others. There was Anthony West, who is no longer with us, who I subscribe to the same theory as him, that the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, but more specifically the Sphinx, is probably 36,000 years old. And so it was a warning. It didn't have that tiny head on it. I talked about this previously. It really had a lion's head on it that pointed at Leo and was a warning from a civilization 2 catastrophes back. And we're just not heeding those warnings. And of course, in the lower right-hand corner is Velikovsky, who's talked about this sort of thing, way back, 60 years ago or more. In the upper right-hand corner is a nova. It's a NASA photo where if you look in the center, you can still see that the sun is still there, though this star has novaed. And underneath the Coming Earth Catastrophe text, which I placed over there, this is from a website called the Thunderbolts Project, I believe, and that's the Electric Universe. And I advise you to visit all of these websites. There's such a wealth of information right now available to people that this thing is very likely to occur if in our lifetimes, if we're lucky enough to live the next, say, 25 years. But remember, they talk about these cycles, but it's not as if you can nail it down to a particular year exactly. I know Douglas Vogt has a time frame somewhere in October, but watch his go visit his site, the Diehold Foundation. He makes it clear it's a 501c3, nonprofit. But check his work out. His videos are lengthy, but then again, so are mine. And he's I don't know. I don't want to criticize him. I've enjoyed watching his videos over the past couple of years. Ben Davidson has picked up the slack on this, I guess you could call it, and has put out so many hours of videos dealing with these topics that it's mind-blowing, and gets into the papers, the peer-reviewed papers, and shows the studies that have been made that are proving this more and more by what you would call mainstream science, academia. Even though academia is very cautious in how they present the data, nonetheless, the data is there and it can't be argued with anymore. Bright Insights YouTube channel has just his latest video is a very good one as far as the Eye of Africa. And the thing about this is that, and even if you get into Randall Carlson, who's like, most people know him from talking about the Younger Dryas period and the occurrence in the northwestern U.S., and that his theory of an asteroid causing a melt there and subsequent sea level rise, etc. And the same with Hancock, has been talking about this for, since Fingerprints of the Gods, his original book. I think it was Fingerprints of the Gods, or there's a follow-up book to it. I could have almost put Carlson and Hancock's picture on that little mini collage on there, and perhaps I should have. And what I'm trying to say is, I advise you all to, if you're interested in this topic, and this is a big topic, that you could explore it through these gentlemen. Anyway, the title of this show, if you're looking at this somewhere like on a smart TV or somewhere, and you don't have the ability to look at show more, is Tony Caravan Live 5/25/2021, The Coming Earth Catastrophe. And the description below says, from archaeology to astrophysics, more and more evidence is pointing to a 12,000-year cycle of an Earth catastrophe caused by our star. Time is running out. And I apologize for the road rally in the background. It's just one of those things. My station on YouTube, my channel on YouTube, is called Rock Flux.
Rock Flux Live.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
Well, let's hear it.
Insert your station call letters here.
Here we go.
I gotta go.
Go clear to go. Hey, don't think this sounds really cool. Let's roll. Go.
Unfortunately, we're not playing music today, so. I'm also on Locals, and I understand that Locals may be experimenting with live. And if they are, and I hope they're successful with it, I'd love nothing more than to get off of YouTube and go over to live. We'll see what happens at that point. But I'm following that very closely. The Morning Joe mug. So let's look at this thing. All right. We have, and we literally, I was going to say thousands, but, hundreds for sure, of what people have called myths or stories. And, it's interesting when people get into linguistics, they talk about the idea of what a myth or a story might be compared to what we say today. And I forget who was saying this recently. May have been one of those gentlemen that I had on the title card, may not have been. It may have been someone else. And it may have been about dealing with a different topic altogether. Whatever the case may be, the idea is that when you hear someone say, I'm going to tell you a story, right? It's, or read me a story, like a childhood story. People today, they feel as if that's something fictional, perhaps. The word story. It doesn't hold this, the weight of what a story really is. And over time, what we refer to as myth are just or folklore. I was talking about Jacques Vallée, where his book, where he used the word from folklore to UFOs, in his, matter of factual, compilation of every, where he wasn't doing the Mulder, I want to believe, and rather what he was doing is taking all the actual reports over a century and just literally putting them in chronological order and listing them. Okay. And so that's the thing. This is such a serious topic. And, this is it. You would think, someone's saying Earth catastrophe, the sun having some kind of micronova, a 12,000 years cycle and the next deluge, so to speak, is a serious topic. There are people out there like, where's the guy's tin hat? But the fact is, this is probably the most serious topic of the times. And, let me take you back and let's just look at this. And I've covered this before, but since this show is just dedicated to strictly this topic, now there'll be some repetition of some previous things I've discussed. So let's go back and imagine, say, 72,000 years ago. And we're on a 12,000 year cycle, say, or even 36,000 years ago. And excuse me, I'm going to have to clear my throat. It's going to happen a lot. It's 6:33 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, it's the way I am, my age. If I weren't I'm drinking this stuff, if I weren't trying to keep lubricate my throat, I probably wouldn't even be able to talk. But enough of that. And by the way, I didn't even put like Plato up there, to deal with the story of Atlantis. Again, in fact, that may have been where I heard it. Perhaps it was that Jimmy guy talking about the story of Atlantis and the lost in translation. I think it was. Watch his video. Watch Bright Insight's latest video. He really puts it to. He really deals with that. That Eye of Africa. It's the most comprehensive video I've seen about that made to date. So that said, I'm going to push more into into some other things. And I apologize for having some YouTube pop-up notifications and whatnot. So to me, and none of everything that any of us are saying are based on, while scientifically based, are based on observations, right? Whether it's archaeology, like I say, astrophysics, from something that a telescope has captured, right? Something that Apollo mission may have discovered on the moon, something that a rover on Mars has discovered, and something that has been uncovered here on the planet Earth. Right? I mean, that's our hard evidence. The idea that we have physical evidence of catastrophic events occurring. And most recently, there is such an overwhelming number of events and data that points to the same timeline approximately 12,000 years ago. From 11,600 to 12,000, but in that range, approximately 12,000 years ago. And it comes to a point now where you have to say, wait a second. Why is everything pointing to 12,000 years? All right. And it's 12,000, and we're at that time again. And like I say, it's not a matter of a cycle, being, pinpointed down to a specific month, day, or an hour. We're talking about the sun, our star, this immense thing. We're talking about our planet, which is hurling through space, right? And we're talking about events that occur that affect sometimes the wobble of our planet, right? The speed of our rotation. And even though sometimes the length of our day, and even though they're, maybe just millisecond changes, but over 12,000 years, right? These various subtleties, in our transit, right? Being dragged along by our star, right? Through space, that these milliseconds or these subtle changes in magnetic fields, electric universe, what have you, can lead to, changing that, that the idea it's not 12,000, even, put it that way. So this thing could happen tomorrow. Or, but the idea is it's very less likely to happen beyond the point of, say, the next 20 plus years. And meanwhile, everyone is preoccupied. The only people who seem to be taking this seriously are those who are looking at the hard evidence. So it kind of makes all these other things that are going on around us, that the media is all caught up in, seem like child's play. Or worse yet, perhaps some kind of nefarious diversions. And as you'll learn as you go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and I recommend you do, in researching this material, you'll see the involvement of like the CIA, other government agencies, this idea that now that the Pentagon has been releasing things about UFOs, which basically demonstrates that they've been lying for 70 years. So it's not so much the UFO thing. Yesterday I talked a bit about that when I was talking about Jacques Vallée and some of and those other books that chronicle this. It's not so much the UFO phenomenon, UFOs themselves, ufology, or any of that stuff. See, what hits me more is the idea that we've been lied to for 70 years. And if they can lie to us about something like that, then, the classic excuse that people have had for years, they say, oh, the government can't do anything right. right? The government can never keep a secret. But people don't understand. I lived and worked in Capitol Hill. Look, these alphabet agencies, they compartmentalize everything. People working for these agencies are true believers. They call them patriots. They honestly believe they're doing the best they can for their country and following the oath that they've taken. They have no idea what's going on in a couple of floors up, or in another building, or in another location somewhere else. So you can't blame, the entire system and everyone in it. I'm constantly pouring sodas and putting ice cubes in glasses and stuff. If you're wondering what I'm doing, apologize for that. Like I said, or like she says.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I mean, it's
The only station that matters.
Okay.
so everything points right now. We're at a juncture, a serious juncture. And this has just happened upon me because I've been interested in this, for I don't know, all my life. I've been studying, things, as I started out with.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
I mean, that's my thing. When I was a kid, I read science fiction books and then throughout my life, I was just more interested in researching. I mean, obviously, I purchased this book back in when would that have been? It would have to, it might have been around right when she published this in the late 80s, to tell you the truth. Now that I think about it, because by the 90s, I was a creative director of an advertising agency and working on, internet projects. I had already been on the internets. So once I was in the internet and into the advertising thing, and I hadn't gotten out of the entertainment industry, which this time period when I was reading, these kinds of books and stuff was an interim period, transitional period. And that definitely was prior to, So I pretty much read this book pretty much within, a couple of years of it being published. And I was reading many books like that. And there's all sorts of books. And, and some of them you read and, after time you realized, it was like Sitchin. A lot of his Sumerian translations. I mean, he was the only guy out there talking about Nibiru and that sort of thing. And so everyone looked to it and took everything he said as, as fact. But, we've learned that, much of Sitchin's work was, he kind of filled in the blanks and fictionalized certain things. Right. So, the Planet X thing, is not really, I mean, there's a lot of Planet X's out there is what we've learned ultimately after that. And they may or may not have effects on the sun. This Cantrell in her book, refers, again, this is another, it's like a compendium. I guess she's just gone through research and research and research. It's, though she's very opinionated in some, in rather kind of like the way I am on some of my shows, she just comes out and just speaks her mind. But they refer to Nemesis in that as well. Now, of course, it's not to say that Nemesis doesn't exist, because, if you look at the electric universe idea, and the idea that Saturn was our sun initially, and that the Earth was part of the Saturnian system, Earth, Mars, and Venus, and that all of these ancient rock drawings were basically plasma, things that people saw in the sky, and plasma formations and that sort of thing. And that when our star, present star, Sol, there was some sort of massive cataclysmic thing that then formed the current solar system that we have. And and that's an interesting area of discovery as well. These are all serious. The thing about it is, most of these people are serious scientists, and if they're not serious scientists, they're very serious individuals who've done their research, and what they're talking about is backed up by fact. Like I always say, or as much fact as you can. It's not enough to take my word for something or someone else's word for a thing. It's like, and it's not like you don't get confirmation from a second source, like the media, well, it was confirmed by another source. It's like, no, go get 6 sources, right? 7 sources. And then see, what they all seem to agree on, and what things that don't seem to be agreed upon or reinforced by another person or the majority, then those things are not worth repeating. I'm getting out of breath talking nonstop about this. However, in this case, the more sources you seem to go to, the stronger the case is. And there's a commonality of the 12,000 number is at this point isn't even up for debate, right? It's not even up for a debate. We have the physical evidence, archaeological evidence. It's there in the archaeological record, right? And we're now seeing these micronovas, so to speak, through our telescopes, that stars are shedding these shells, or whatever you want to call it, and the star remains. So this is not the concept of a supernova being the only way, the only end of a star, or the only thing that happens, whenever some binary system or whatever, all these various theories that have been talked about over the years. We're finding that that's simply not true. We have hard evidence now. We have photographic satellite, space telescope evidence. On Earth, we have archaeological evidence. And we've sent missions to the moon and Mars that seem to have confirmed the same thing, though those have been somewhat clandestine. But as Douglas Vogt, points out, Apollo is the sun god. So why would you send a lunar mission and call it Apollo? Right? And then back to the CIA. Why was the CIA classifying information, in this area? And even once FOIA documents were released, why are these documents still highly redacted? But I want to get back to my earlier thing where I was mentioning about 36,000 years ago. And this guy, Anthony West, who's no longer with us, I mentioned that before. And he was kind of part of that whole group of Egyptologists, guys who studied, spent a lot of time around the pyramids and the Sphinx. And his idea was, he felt, like many others do, myself included, that the Sphinx was much older than what the so-called legitimate Egyptologists were claiming. What I call colonial man, right? These basically people who were just going on expeditions for museums, kind of plundering, right? That's what it really was. And this stuff ends up in the British museums and other places, and worst of all, private collections throughout the world. And like things in the Vatican archive. There's like a, excuse me. In Plato's original story about Atlantis, when you get towards the end of it's missing, right? And a lot of people just like accept that, oh, I guess that was lost, or somehow that wasn't somewhere through antiquity that those pages were lost, or the rest of that was lost. But you got to wonder, is that in the Vatican archives? And what's the deal with the Vatican archives? If they have these ancient texts, why are they hiding them from the public? Why is there and why is there no demand, to have that information digitized and brought out? Particularly in a time right now where there's so much compelling evidence that we could be on the verge of a major near extinction event. It's a possibility. It's a distinct possibility. A global catastrophe of, beyond any disaster film. All right. And we're seeing hard evidence of it. And yet there are people hiding ancient texts in the Vatican. And there are these generations of plunderers who have what I call the Davos set, right? The World Economic Forum type of people, these old world order sorts, who fashion themselves, fancy themselves to be the rulers of the planet, right? Who have in private collections all of these things. And they're nothing more than an organized crime syndicate in my mind. And I know that turns a lot of people off, but really, right? There's 8 billion people, nearly 8 billion people on the planet, and there's probably maybe 8,000 people involved in basically ruling over those 8 billion. And I'm sure, and remember, the set, that seed thing they set up in Svalbard, quite a few years ago now, to preserve, it's interesting that, and all these big noises, these like loud booms that people are hearing at different places, and these underground diggings and caverns of passages and whatnot. We know that the continuity of government has built so many places for the elite to escape to. Many of them been exposed or public knowledge now. But whether or not that's going to help them if they're buried in 1,000 or a mile of ice, good luck getting out. So my question is, I have more questions, than answers, unfortunately. But in the aggregate, when you look at all of these individuals that are studying this now, and I'm sure, the people that I've mentioned are just, are just a handful of hundreds of people, if not thousands around the world, that are aware of this. It's mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing. And to think that people can be concerned about, issues of catching, some kind of germ or so-called social issues of the day, things of that nature that are, that matter, but that, in the balance of compared to a extinction event, they're lower on the list, right? Put it that way, of priorities to be dealt with. If somebody's calling somebody a name or there's some sort of abuse based upon some bigotry, I think, absent violence, I think it's more important the consideration that, we may be here today and gone tomorrow, should put an end to those kinds of bigotries, or the media capitalizing on it and using and trying to pit people against each other for whatever, whether it's to sell commercials for used cars or whether it's politicians trying to divide people for the sake of their own political gain, greed, and power and whatnot. Because that's really what it's all about. Just keep in mind that the flow of information. I put T-shirts out, and I have one T-shirt that says everything you know is wrong, and I have another one that says you don't know what you don't know. And the idea is that how do you know what? When I say you don't know what you don't know, think about it. That's a pretty profound statement. It's a great shirt. You should get one. TonyCaravanLive.com. Right. But the problem is what we know comes to us from the media. And when I say media, I mean everything now, right? Social media, mainstream media, legacy media, radio, I don't care. This, everything media. If I wasn't talking about this, you would know about this necessarily. Someone who it wasn't aware of those other people that I've mentioned before. And so the media focuses on issues for the sake of, remember, they are commercial ventures. I call this the former United States because we have irreconcilable differences, red state, blue state, different ideologies. People are, it's like a marriage gone bad. The marriage counselor says, yeah, you guys, you could stop coming. And the judge goes, boom, irreconcilable. I grant the divorce, irreconcilable differences. There's no United States anymore. All right. We have irreconcilable differences. This is a former United States. Right now, it's a for-profit corporatocracy. Let's accept the fact. Big tech, big pharma, right? Military contractors, right? This is it. Their influence over the government. So it's a corporatocracy. Government is, they're marionette. Politicians are marionettes, right? So, this is the reality we live in today. And you have to, that's your canvas. You have to accept that's the background of all of this kind of stuff. And so you have the media, which is, like I said, anything that's going to provide you with some kind of information. That's the flow of information. That's what you know. You don't know what you don't know. In other words, unless it's happening firsthand. If outside my window here, there's a car hits a telephone pole, well then I know a car hit a telephone pole, but everyone else in town has to watch the news to know that there was a car accident that hit a telephone pole, and that's why the power's out for an hour or two till they get the wires fixed. And so the same goes with all of these issues, these divisive issues of things that are going on in society right now. Western civilization is pretty much collapsed because of the media. But the media is just like kind of a propaganda wing of this, what I call an international organized crime syndicate, this Davos set that meets every year and decides what they're going to do. And the former United States is basically a corporatocracy. It's a for-profit corporatocracy. And so the media is selling advertising and trying to keep you, glued to your set. So they could sell more cars, pharmaceuticals, et cetera, and political ads. And so that the power elite, the ruling elite, can keep their stranglehold, over the 8 billion people on the planet. It's not that hard to see. And there is no other alternative to that. There's no argument. Like I say, there aren't two sides to every story. Some things are what they are. That's it. Again, my ice cubes have melted. And without getting woo-woo with you folks, wherever this thing is, here it is. Electromagnetic radiation tester. Turn it on. Harmful. This is my sacrifice. I turn it over to the futon, it goes off. Turn it back towards the electronic equipment here, computers, goes off. Turn it over towards the window, it goes off. Back at the computer equipment, it goes on. I swear it's the electromagnetic radiation that's melting my ice cubes. I mean, I'm serious. It's called. I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt today. It's cooler in here. I shouldn't be melting it so quickly. Okay, so you don't know what you don't know because everything you know is wrong, basically, because the media is telling you this stuff. So the only people telling you these things are people on YouTube or people that have certain rights. But now YouTube is starting to crack down big time. So I'm wondering if it's they're coming after me. I've already gotten I can see they're I've got the warnings and different things for nothing other than because all I'm trying to do is share information with you. I'm not telling you to do anything, On my latest book, Codex, over here, which deals with the hard problem of consciousness and free flow of information. And if you could look back here, there's a stack of books for new people watching this for the first time. Yeah, I've got 9 books on Amazon right now. Buy one. Get one of those shirts. And all this equipment here, this great solar stuff.com is all stuff I have to help you through, if a CME hits or something weird like that, something on a lesser scale, that you'll at least, have power. I don't have listed on that site, but I do have it for myself. I've got my own Faraday. I don't have a Faraday cage. What I have is cloth. There's fabric now that's available that functions as a Faraday cage. And so any kind of, the one thing we have with all these satellites pointed at the sun is that we do have kind of a warning. I mean, it's not much of a warning. I mean, if it's a catastrophic event, we're screwed. But I mean, if it's a smaller event, like a Carrington event or something, it's like get your key stuff in your Faraday cage. And then you'll still at least be able to have, somewhat quality of life. But if the grid goes down and the grid stays down, well, excuse me, there's nothing we can do about that. So anyway, back to this. I keep not finishing this Sphinx idea that I have. So let's say we're not the first people, the first civilization on this planet to have existed and have risen to some sort of level. And forget the word technology, okay? Technology is overrated, right? Excuse me. Apologize for that. There's nothing I could do about it. So, say 36,000 years ago, there was a civilization, an advanced civilization, right? And they were working, and they put these obelisks all around the world, kind of in this sense of like Tesla, the idea of tapping into the energy that's just there in the ether, so to speak. It's like the Washington Monument, but like, we see these things in Egypt, right? These obelisks. But what a lot of people don't tell you is that they're also found in all other parts of the world, like on the African continent, South America, Asian locations. And so these people were trying to utilize, and perhaps it was the Great Pyramid. I didn't know this is just a theory of mine. Okay. The Sphinx was a warning, was basically pointing at Leo, was trying to say, leave a thing to say a warning. But that wasn't let's forget about the warning thing. They were trying to build a machine that was going to deflect this solar outburst. And you say, that's insane. Okay? It's not insane. Our magnetic field right now is weakening. Okay? We know that. And we have problems because of it. All right? But what does the magnetic field do? It protects us from cosmic rays. It protects us even from solar rays. Okay? Now, what's to say that we couldn't somehow tap into the Earth's energy, this dynamo, spinning dynamo, or what have you, just trying to figure out some of Tesla's ideas, that could take you years. What if these guys figured it out? They were an advanced civilization. They may not have relied on machines the way we do. See, we're so caught up in technology as like, some sort of, it's the God of our day, right? It's the gods, the way, other generations. Here, the cell phone. Okay. Like I say all the time, this has become the center of everyone's life, this black mirror, right? And but it's only really been mainstream for about 10 years. Yeah, it's been around longer than that, almost up to 15 years when you include apps and stuff like that. But basically, this didn't become mainstream where it became the center of everyone's life. You can't live without it. It's got to be in your pocket, your purse, next to your bedside. Okay. This thing's only been around about 10 years where it's been that much the center of somebody's life. All right. And the further back you go, look, in the early 20th century, people were still using outhouses. When the Roman Empire fell, and no one was maintaining the aqueducts, and they had toilets and all that sort of stuff. That was the end of that. And people just kind of more or less scattered and just became, the soldiers that were up in Britain just got married, had families, and that's why you have guys, a lot of Tonys in Great Britain. Right? True story. But that was the end of that. That was the end of their water technology. And it took, and in the US of A, it was years. And in the grand scheme of things, it was just recently, within the past 100 years, that we've had flushing toilets. Think about that. But I mean, the whole process from trains to, telegraphs to radio, television, computers, internet, etc. But it was a pretty, quick recent development that we became dependent upon technology. Prior to that, we were pretty much living the same way people lived for the prior hundreds of years, for centuries. If not millennia. We could build buildings, we could build roads, but it was, until the train came along, and then eventually the cars, the horseless carriage. It was a horse and buggy, and, multi-floor. Sorry, my cat is doing something off to the side. Hold on. Sorry about that. And for those watching this later, by moving, I have a leg problem. I tripped the other day, last week, and it just kind of pulled my leg out by trying to figure out whether the cat was doing something, coughing up a fur ball or what have you. Oh, okay, I'm all right. Yeah.
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay now. It's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay. So, but honest with you,
I'm a dead man if I don't get this out of my head.
I can get it out.
How?
A cranial drill and a pair of forceps.
So we had buildings. Look at like Washington, D.C. They built the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, right? All of those buildings, government buildings, these massive stone structures, right? Churches, always got priority in cities. They were always massively these big stone architectural wonders. And then, and skyscrapers, taller buildings, multi-floor, multi-resident buildings. And, initially, was, the term gaslighting. We had, we did have gas to light that came along. But what I'm trying to get at, without going through some kind of litanizing every bit of technology down to when it happened, is that civilization, the founding of, say, the United States, what I call the former United States, Western civilization as we've come to know it, the great universities, places of study, right? The cities, all were created in a time without automobiles, electricity, and certainly not computers, internet, and any of this crazy technology we have today. And for sure not with, some 10-year-old, device that became the center of everyone's life. Many people didn't even have toilets 100 some years ago. And that's a fact in many areas. But we still had merchants, cities, businesses, and all sorts of commerce, and the quality of life for many people, not all, was at a fairly high level. People lived well. They had food to eat. They had shelter. There were roads, pubs, churches, businesses, markets. And for those into government, these grandiose government buildings that mimic the ancient Greek, Roman, Greco architecture and things of that nature. And the Egyptians, of course. Or whoever really built that stuff in Egypt. So civilization is not dependent upon technology. And we somehow don't really teach that in schools. We're obsessed with with just this short period of time. And it is something to marvel how quickly we went from, from a carriage, a horse and buggy, to landing a man on the moon and the internet. Okay? I mean, it's quite something to, behold. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's like the blink of an eye. So let's look back at civilizations that may not have went down that particular path. That they may have had technology that wasn't relying on, on machinery, so to speak, or the type of equipment or computers in the way we rely on computers and certain machinery. In other words, I often talk about it, and I don't really like to, it's not like I want to be critical or be cruel. But, I used to talk about the dumbing down of America, and I stopped talking about that, referring to it. And then I started to refer to it more like other people refer to it. And again, it's not exactly a nice phrase, but functionally illiterates. Okay? The people are functionally illiterate. And they're a product of our school system, our education system. Some craziness going on outside my window. Now, the reason I bring that up is that you don't know what you don't know. And in our society, academia and the media has basically controlled the flow of information. So what you know comes to you second or third hand. And the way our societies are structured, and the way it just works, our dependence upon computers and machinery equipment takes us away from the idea of using our bioelectric brains. And I often talk about savants, right? People with photographic memories, people who have total recall. Okay? The Da Vinci's, the Einsteins, and, genius in general. And that we don't look at the idea that if you had a civilization that was advanced itself and had brain power, for lack of a better word. There's some kind of construction going on outside, and I'm sorry, this is a very live show and I can't interrupt it. So just bear with me, please. Maybe you're not even hearing it and I'm just being, overly apologetic, but this is important. If you had the brain power of total recall, if you had a photographic memory, right? If your brain functioned kind of like an Einstein brain or a Leonardo da Vinci, you really wouldn't care so much about this thing. All right? Because when the storage capacity of a computer, remember, there was always writing and chronicling of certain things. We're constantly uncovering texts, and we're uncovering things that were, the stuff that we find that, was, chopped into rocks, or scribbled on some kind of papyrus or animal skin or whatever, put in clay jars and caves. That's one thing. But we don't know what other means of recording people had. Which always brings me back to the library and, the archives. Library of Alexandria, what was in there really, and the archives that are being hidden in the Vatican. But that during a massive catastrophe, you have to imagine that it's like use the idea of a scouring pad, of everything, of taking a Brillo pad, scouring pad, and scouring the earth or scouring the area, so that the only things that did survive were things that were buried underground. Like Göbekli Tepe, was believed to be intentionally buried. And we haven't even explored because of the unrest in that part of the world. We haven't explored 90% of that. We don't even know what's under there. Who knows what they might find? What was in those granite boxes, in Egypt? That no one could explain how they even got them underground. And how come people don't laugh out loud when Egyptologists and people like that say, "Oh, it was some bull cult and they buried bulls in there." Yeah, come on. It's like every time they discover some kind of interesting structure that they can't explain. They say it's got to be a temple or it's got to be a tomb, right? It's laughable to anybody with any kind of intellect. So imagine civilizations 36,000 years ago, 72,000 years ago. You know, Homo sapiens sapiens have been around for a long time. That means people had the exact same brain, bioelectric brain as we have. So that you could, you know, assuming that you were, you know, you could speak their language, a person today would be able to, you know, sitting in a place devoid of technology, such as a park, right? Or something, you know, taking a walk somewhere, would be able to communicate completely with that individual and should be able to share the same philosophical ideas, right? You know, ponder things, you know, postulate. You know, we don't see, we don't really look at this idea that what we've chosen to become reliant on particular mechanical device machines powered and computers is not necessarily the crowning achievement of civilization. It's just what we decided to do in the last 200 years, or, you know, like, or less, right? But like, it's just like 200 years out of a planet that's what, 4.5 billion years old, but out of humans that have been around for, you know, so, you know, that have had the same brains for hundreds of thousands of years, if not a million years or so. So just look, so even if you just go back 36,000 years ago, this would be a great movie to watch. And I wish the entertainment industry would get into it, because it seems to be the only way you could pass on this kind of information these days. Because it's definitely doesn't get reported. And people don't seem to want to grasp this unless it's in some kind of narrative form, right? Entertaining narrative, you know, story. But say 36,000 years ago, there was, and it would be prior to 36,000 years ago. This would be the interim after the previous catastrophe, which would have been thousands and thousands of years. So plenty of time for a society to develop, right? To recoup. Remember, myth, stories would be the things that those who somehow survived in caves or at equatorial zones or wherever would have maintained, it's like right now, if the catastrophe occurred now and for some reason I survived, of course all our technology's gone, but I had some stuff in some Faraday cages and I was still able to you know, for a while, you know, with the solar panel and this box here and this thing here, I had lighting, right? And music, you know, my music collection or whatever. And, you know, capabilities of, you know, I have a garden in my backyard and I'm growing foods, and might even be able to solar charge so that I could grow, you know, have my grow lights hooked up to that thing, because LEDs use very little electricity. So I would become somewhat of some legend with people, you know, or something. People might think of me as some, you know, rather than just some average regular guy, they might elevate me to some level, you know, and I would be teaching them and telling them tales, you know, as I aged And then over the years, these things would just become, because my equipment would falter, it would, it would just, and then over hundreds or if not thousands of years, it would disintegrate into nothingness. Right? And so all that would be left would be the stories of this guy,
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
There'd be this guy. There was this guy once, and he was able to control the power of the sun. And he created sounds and taught us, he was a great teacher. He taught us how to grow food, and he did all of these things, and he, brought agriculture, and, and to me, it would be nothing. I'm just a survivor from this thing. But, what I say, functionally illiterate people, the idea of saying, hey, locate near that water source so we can dig a trench and build, irrigation, little trenches and grow food. And here's how you build a building, right? This is what we need. And watch out for this. And look, we're going to build a building here because, because I've got my watch in my Faraday cage with the date in it, right? The Sumerian guys all had watches. Remember that? Right? Or something. And so I say, hey, look, let's build this building that points at, on December 21st or, the solstice, so that we know the seasons, so you can be prepared for when the cold weather's going to come, or you might have to migrate to a southern area, or the time when the warmer weather is going to come and we can plant. You see, very simple things, but left over a survivor from the cataclysm. Somebody who by chance, just a random person. It's a very interesting idea. It's almost like in that movie, The Postman, where that one guy was a copy machine repairman, was the leader of the other side, and right. And I forget what the postman himself was. He was just something. He, some other just regular job or something. But the guy was a copy machine repairman, and he was like the leader of this thing. Well, that's what happens after a catastrophe. Okay, so take that whole fantastic idea in mind, which in my mind is very realistic, is how it occurs, and why, and what myths are, and these stories in quotation marks that have been passed down. And say that this 36,000 years ago was the last cataclysm, but several thousand years before that, even several hundred years before that, that civilization had risen to a level as higher than we are. Okay. Sorry about that. Too much carbonation, but I got to keep going with it. Keeps me going. They just didn't use technology or computers necessarily. Okay. Because they're unnecessary. In that, this isn't Luddite stuff. Okay. I love technology. All right. Love it. I'm using it every day. But they didn't. They had other ways. They focused on, instead of dumbing down their children, trying to control and manipulate, and developing a society that was based upon advertising and selling bright and shiny objects, right? And that certain people would profit and that you would have a society tiered on greed, right? Power and greed. And so it was control and manipulation of masses and dumbing down, so to speak, right? And diverting people, misdirection, diverting people away from the truth and understanding, so that you would have leaders that would be considered godlike or in touch with the gods. See, okay? And in that instance, right, you can develop much higher than we are. Okay? Because and you would have a more interesting civilization, right? If people were allowed to explore, if there were more people allowed to explore their full potential of their bioelectric brain in society. All right, this is okay. I'm trying to deal with a massive, ridiculous thing. I have my cat that's just tried to cross a technological area. Okay, say hi. Go ahead, say hi. You want to say hi? No. Okay. Yeah, I know. Go over there. This has happened a lot lately. It was impassable. And the cat just walked in my ice cubes, walked on keyboards. Okay. I'm in the middle of a story and I'm losing my trend of thought. I apologize. This is live TV. Man, this is live. You can't get any more live. That was also.
This is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
So I'm sorry if this becomes, discordant and messed up. I'll try to keep it on track and finish this trend of thought. It's all about this catastrophe. So this civilization decided they knew that of the 12,000 year cycle. And so they had decided to construct this deflector of sorts. They figured it out. They said, we're going to be able to utilize the magnetic field, the natural forces and energy of this planet to protect us from what this solar outburst. Okay. And if you look, because it's pretty funny, anybody who's like, excuse me, watched even one Star Trek episode or any kind of, most sci-fi's adapted, space sci-fi's have adapted this now, is this idea of a force field, shields, right? I hate to geek you out, but hey, Scotty, I need you to get those shields up, okay? All right. So that's what our magnetic field really is. It's a shield. And that's what the sun has, and the sun provides additional protection to like the whole group, what we call the solar system, as we're hurling through space and all this cosmic stuff is being, flung at us, right? And so these guys figured it out and said, hey, well, I don't have I'm just saying. And maybe it has something to do with those obelisks and stuff. Maybe it has something to do with the way they, the location of these things and these, why are so many of these structures built on these areas and why did the CIA even study this back in the 60s, this magnetism idea, this idea of magnetic fields and of the earth and areas where there are magnetic anomalies or things of that sort. You know, were they did they have access to some of these ancient texts? See, that's the thing I was trying to get at before. It's not just the Vatican archives, but it's the idea that these plunderers, these colonial people that went down and have in private collections may well have things, you know? You know, what did the Nazis do? They were obsessed with that stuff, going down there and doing digs. You know, that was that whole, you know, what is it? The Harrison Ford movies, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark type of stuff. You know, they dealt with some of that stuff in some of their little fictional stories. My chair just fell down. So what's to say that, you know, the CIA, you know, post-World War II, you know, the Soviet Union, didn't get their hands on some of these things. There was a whole thing about that was like the big deal. That was front page news. Expeditions. You know, I spent the early part of you know, in the 90s, I was like involved in expeditions to Antarctica, the North Pole, and the Himalayas. That's what I used to do. I created actually proprietary software to broadcast live from Antarctica, the North Pole, and then the Himalayas. You know, expeditions have always been interesting to people. But in the early part of the 20th century, and even going back further, much further, that was a thing that was done. So, you know, archaeological digs, what did they find? Why did they find these ridiculously large granite, you know, boxes that are all opened? What was in them? Right? And did these things become, are they in private collections, you know, or in the hands of these government people? Who knows? All right. Were they their Faraday cages? Did they store stuff in there? You know, who knows? But these are questions that, you know, this is the stuff that life's about. We're human beings living on a planet hurling through space. And people are worried about some social issue, about, you know, whether or not, you know, how many bathrooms you have in a grade school, right? When we could be, you know, when we're facing down the barrel of a gun coming at us that's going to basically could end civilization, you know, I mean, a near extinction event. And all of this stuff is just being exacerbated by a media that just want to sell cars and pharmaceuticals. You know, you see the absurdity of it. You know, people are worrying about color, skin color, but they don't care about the continent of Africa, right? No, the media, like I say, so what destroyed Western civilization and what ruined the U.S. completely, destroyed the U.S. Completely, is this media corporatocracy alliance, you know, the big tech media alliance, and this idea of diversion and allowing these megalomaniacs, which are basically narcissistic sociopaths, with a few psychopaths thrown in there, to basically divert everything, to be so obsessed, so self-centered, and obsessed with this greed and power, right? That they wanted to deprive us of a true understanding of our human nature, the power of our brain. Like the whole concept of transhumanism is ridiculous, right? Who needs a machine? If one human, right, can have total recall, photographic memory, if savants can do this, you know, there are savants that can read this book, okay, and, you know, ridiculous amount of pages. I've got time. Let's see how many pages are in this book. This is a ridiculously long book. Her references alone are insane in the back. It's hard to find where her... Actually, she has this in chapters. She doesn't literally list it, but I don't know. Look how many pages it is. Okay, if some guy could has the ability, and they do, to say, oh, on page 783, 7 lines down, it says life could not have evolved from heavy radiation such as this, which is actually a line in that book. They would know that off the top of their head without looking at the book. Well, what do they need a freaking computer for? A thumb drive or terabytes of memory or the cloud or a cloud service? Do you see? And so it's quite possible that you dealt with that. So, a society that basically decided to use their bioelectric brains, right? And still lived a quality of life comparable to ours or even beyond it. It's like many people, we have this idea. It's like everything is wrong, I say, and you only know it. You don't know what you don't know. People have ideas of how Romans existed because of movies mainly or TV series, right? Or some still pictures where they, bury, unearthed Pompeii, and saw some tiled walls, but the reality was those were multi-story buildings with stairwells and windows and shopping centers, courtyards, right? We have no idea the quality of what else was there, the drapes on their window, the furniture in the house. I mean, take your own house and take your computer, Remember, they had running water. They had bathrooms. Okay? They had baths and stuff. Okay? Who knows what else they had? All right. So what I'm getting at is that it's quite possible that, say, this prior to the 36,000 year extinction level event, say 2 centuries or so, a couple centuries before it, maybe even just 1 century before it, they were working on a project to deflect this. They figured it out with their brains, using their mental capacity. Okay, there were many Einsteins. Okay, in a sense, Stephen Hawking's and whatever. We have so many mathematicians and physicists today in our great universities that have minds, tremendous minds. Okay. But we have massive amounts of functionally illiterate people because we have an education system that just messes with their brains. It's a nanny state. It indoctrinates them, conditions them, and so we're not creating Einsteins and Da Vinci's. Instead, we're creating functionally illiterate people that will be, consumers. All right. Or like I always say in most of my shows, cattle on a tax farm or a consumer farm. That's right. That's what the education, the nanny state creates. So imagine a civilization 36,000 years ago that wasn't creating this. All right. What would be, what type of people would that society have, and what level would they be at? And what alternatives we can only imagine. We can't even imagine what level of alternative technologies did they develop to make the quality of life at a very high level. In other words, so, it's the idea, the American idea, the pursuit of happiness, right? That's what it's all about. The quality of life, the pursuit of happiness. So what did they do that they were able to have a high quality of life and pursue happiness? Long life, health, right? Search for truth and beauty, right? Just a good life, right? An understanding of things, that sort of thing. And so so all these great minds of this high culture, let's call it what it would be, this high culture, had figured this out, right? I mean, what do we do? Unfortunately, whenever the U.S. or Western civilization, or I guess even, Eastern civilizations, all right, dictatorships and whatnot, it seems the times when they bring their greatest minds together have been in times of war in our era, right? Let's put the greatest minds together and create the Manhattan Project. Let's create a weapon that can destroy the world over, many times over, right? Some of our greatest minds, are, working for the military industrial complex, right? Or in the financial industry, accounting, Wall Street, or worse, entertainment industry, making games, gaming industry, what we call Silicon Valley gaming industry, right? Instead of people pursuing things like, the cure for cancer. See, what if we had all of those minds, right? The leading cause of death in the U.S. is heart disease. Second leading cause of death is cancer. It's not like this thing that they got going around now where you cover your face and all that garbage, right? They could solve that like that. They already did, I'm sure. There already are things, right? But it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry, so hey, to heck with that. And plus, it's a way of controlling people and keeping them dumbed down so they watch TV and buy used cars and new cars and pharmaceuticals. Well, imagine a civilization that focused on something different. Okay. But, so they had this grand project, right? And created these structures around the earth all over. And in effect, like the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. So it was a machine. And they were going to use this to deflect this outburst that they knew of because they were warned by previous civilizations, because their civilization didn't plunder or hide or have some private party in Brussels where you come over to their house of these Davos World Economic Forum people and they say, hey, look at this thing that's been in our family for centuries that our great grandfather found in Egypt or in Samaria. It's a thing. I don't know what it is, but it looks like some kind of, outline or blueprint for something. It's amazing, isn't it? Oh yeah. More champagne, please. Right? Yeah, that's a distinct possibility. We're staring down our own extinction while a bunch of people have cocktail parties and don't even know what the hell they have, in their stupid castle-like places. Well, anyway, at some point they realized we're not going to finish this in time. We're running out of time. And they were brilliant enough because they used their bioelectric brains. Remember, they were like our savants. They were our Da Vinci's. They were our photographic memory, total recall people, right? The majority of their society was at that level of intellect. a higher culture, a higher civilization, because they focused on being human, or senses, what we really are, right? Life is about experiencing through our senses and utilizing all of our faculties. And so they said, hey, we're not going to make it in time. But these were good people. It was a high civilization. So what did they do? They said, we're going to have to try to preserve the highest and best that we've produced. And we're going to have to let's leave some kind of structures, things that we can do within the next 20, 25 years that will survive this onslaught, so that the generation 12,000 years, the next generation, the next civilization, I should say, that we can give them a warning and they will have a head start early enough to be able to do what we tried to do. They'll have enough time to do it. Imagine that. And they created the Sphinx and other things, and then put this information in these granite containers and all of this stuff for us, right? Or for the next one, which would have been 24,000 years ago. But the people in the 24,000 years ago didn't even get it. Excuse me. Or maybe they did, and that was Atlantis, right? And they built that high culture. But then what happened? Did their civilization fall to the same trappings as us? We're sidetracked by different things, and suddenly it was just destroyed? Who knows? These are big questions. And where is this knowledge hidden? Like I say, where's the end? Why does it just say rest of the story, Plato's story, remainder of the story missing, or whatever? Is it really? Or is they're afraid to tell us what the ending of the story is? I mean, it could be the most, talk about crimes against humanity. That could be the greatest crime against humanity ever propagated. A missing paragraph, or pages or two, or some books in an archive in the Vatican, or things in private collections that people have under glass to show off at cocktail parties. Right? What a pathetic civilization we live in right now, right? Pathetic. So, I just threw out some stuff there. The cat threw me off. It was ridiculous. You can't imagine. It was a nightmare what it did here. It's made a mess of everything, but it's all right. Putting its paws in water and then putting it near wires and stuff. I don't know. Just drive me crazy. So just to end this thing, my advice to you is to check out the Diehold Foundation and Douglas Vogt and Ben Davidson, Suspicious Observers. Check out this guy, Jimmy. I don't know what his last name is. Bright Insights. These are some of the guys on the forefront of, that have the information out there. You can go back and read some of Velikovsky's stuff. That's, it's out there. Books like this and stuff, these are all over the place. I mean, these are compendiums of that have gone through all these Vedic texts and all that kind of stuff, Sumerian things and what have you. And then look to the science, but the idea is that it just seems more and more likely that this is a real occurrence, a real cyclical catastrophe. And, whether or not it will be an extinction event, or like I call it, a near extinction event, because it seems obviously we're here now, so people survived. I remember hearing about a bottleneck at some point when only 6,000 humans supposedly survived, right? But the idea is that, it's important. It's way more important. And even if we somehow dodge a bullet, so to speak, for some reason, it just should draw your attention to the idea of the story I told about what a high civilization is. And instead of us watching Western civilization collapse, watching the U.S. collapse completely, be caught in total disarray with irreconcilable differences, and people saying save America and do this and do that. Meanwhile, they're just trying to sell cars and political ads and pharmaceuticals to people. That maybe, you would hope that would be a wake-up call to the idea that technology, as great as it is, right, is not the do-all, end-all that defines a civilization. What defines a civilization is culture, and is cooperation, right? Pursuit of happiness and truth and beauty. And we don't seem to be, as a society, concerned at all with that. Individually, and many groups of people and communities are, but in general, we're not. So that's really kind of all it is in a nutshell. So, good morning. Whoa, that waked you up. I'm going to end it there. And I advise you to go research this. And, this is a big deal. And I'll talk to you soon. Cheers. Take care.